Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Taking the Stand. It is, of course, Freedom Advocacy production, a fan podcast that takes you into the corridors of power and the courtrooms where justice and liberty applies. Now, it's always fun when reality or politics decides to coincide with a topic that we here at FAN care about and might want to have a discussion about. And I'm, as in the previous week, privileged to be joined by Sara, the chief in charge, the big cheese of Don't Educate, Don't Indoctrinate, and a brand new entity seeking to combat the nonsense of we can call it social justice, we can call it critical race theory, or we can just call it good old racism in South African schools. But this week, Sara, we can contrast the idea of justice and social justice quite neatly, because as ever, the obliging Muppets at the Judicial Service Commission, the JSC, have stepped up to the plate to explain how the idea of social justice and transformation really goes directly against the idea of justice in practice. Now, in a country like South Africa, where injustices are historic and large, perhaps it's time to care more about actual justice than oftentimes the hollowness of capital S, capital J social justice. So to kick off, Judicial Service Commission, JSC, perhaps give us a bit of an understanding as to why this bunch of people is noteworthy and important.
Well, the JSC, the Judicial Service Commission, is a body comprised of 23 people, some judges, some representing the legal fraternity, and politicians, which suggests that it's not well designed and not well structured. And this is the body that interviews people for High Court, Con-Court, Supreme Court of Appeals positions when they become vacant. So basically, it grills the applicants about their views, about some of the work they've done, if they've been judges or acting judges, some of the judgments they've given. But theoretically, when you're looking at appointing people into those sorts of positions, you want a panel of people that is really fair-minded, knows the law, have substantial reputations by and large, and the criticism of it currently is it's way too filled with, for want of a better word, words, lightweights and politicians, and the nature of their recent discussions in interviews bear that out.
Now, to look at the importance of this this entity, and also to look at why it is now a good moment to consider social justice and whether they can work together or whether they actually undermine each other, perhaps it's important to look at the role of a High Court judge or a Supreme Court of Appeals judge or a constitutional court judge, because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's always something that we people who study law, and someone like you who practiced it extensively, it's always this thing, but how can you fight an immoral case or defend someone who might be guilty? And at the end of the day, the concept of justice is in a weird way over romanticized, that the job of a judge sitting on a bench, whether it's High Court, Con-Court, or Supreme Court of Appeal, is not to conjure up the magic of harmony or justice, or harmony or peace and unicorn farts. It's to find a just solution for a wrong that has been committed. It is to work within the realms of practicalities of the law, of reality, and find whether someone has been unjustly treated, and then to find an objectively measurable way to restore them to a position where that harm has been redressed. So when a judge needs to do that, it depends on skill, his ability or her ability to read the law, to analyze facts, to consider evidence, to read perhaps, international law, foreign law. And it strikes me that to apply justice is not this romantic thing it is often pumped up to be. It is a skill set that people in the legal fraternity develop. And that's why, in theory at least, when you're a senior in the legal profession, that's when you get to apply or step up to a judicial role.
Look, I can't add. You've essentially set it out. A judge doesn't necessarily have to know every area of the law, or because judges will have been advocates and attorneys who've specialized in other areas of law, but they must. You expect them to have the capacity to read, to research, and to analyze. That's essentially what you're looking for in a judge, because, as you say, the whole purpose of a judge judging a matter is to apply an objective legal set of legal status, legal situation to the arguments and the evidence placed before them. Now, that's not to say that what is just a just decision may necessarily feel like a fair decision, because the chances are the party who loses is not going to feel it's fair. But it's not fairness per se that's the issue. It is justice, is whether the decision is supported by the law as per the facts and the argument. And judges get it wrong, or people believe it, they've got it wrong, and they appeal it to the next level of judiciary. So it'll go from the High Court. It could go from, if it's a single judge, to a three judge bench, or from a 3-judge bench to the Supreme Court of Appeals, and from there it could be appealed to the Con Court. So that does build in the possibility of error, of wrong interpretation. And that's really what you're looking. So what you're looking for in a judge is not necessarily a range of huge experience, but what you're looking for is the person with enough experience to be able to apply their mind, research the matter, and analyze it to the point where, having all the law in having regard to all the law, a decision is then taken and handed down.
So justice, as the almost, it might sound boring, but it is important in the sense that it is not the fanfares and the banners and the activism of social justice. Social justice has a romanticism to it. It has this moral cause, this moral calling, and this moral momentum it often tries to build up. And where these two things come in conflict is within the parameters of the JSC, which is trying to appoint people who can pursue justice. But now we've got politicians like Dali Mpofu, Julius Malema, starting to say the measurement, the criteria for whether you belong on the High Court or the Supreme Court of Appeal or the Constitutional Court bench is not whether you can apply justice, but it's whether you embody romantically the idea of social justice. So perhaps give us an idea as to who is Judge Unterhalter and why is he such a touch point for this issue?
Well, Judge Unterhalter, David Unterhalter, is a really well-established, respected advocate. He's now sitting on the bench in the High Court, so he's Judge Unterhalter. He's academically considered to be brilliant. He is, in a nutshell, David Unterhalter is a cut above everyone. It doesn't matter pretty much who's in the court, Con Court or otherwise. He's in a league of his own. So ostensibly, we should be very excited that he's applied to sit on the Constitutional Court, because he's frankly should be a shoo-in. But what you have at the JSC is you have an emphasis on questions like, and it's not necessarily exactly what was put to him, but it was put to others. Shouldn't you, as a white man, not consider taking up a position where a black man could fill it? So you're looking at the equality of the races, not the quality of the judicial officer, because it doesn't matter what color another judicial officer is, that very few are likely to anywhere approach David Unterhalter's intellect. So it's questions like that. It's general questions about whiteness. So it goes towards the idea of transforming the court, which is a very social justice position. And from a classical liberal point of view, the color of your skin, whether you've come from a previously disadvantaged history or not, is not the issue. The issue is the skill you bring to the court for the sake of serving the people of South Africa. And there's another side issue with Judge Unterhalter, and that was the fact that he sat as a non-executive director on the Jewish Board of Deputies, which is essentially a big charity organization for the Jewish community. And he's been attacked on the fact that it's a pro-Zionist or pro-Israel organization, and he's very sitting on it, contradicts their political feelings from a pro-Palestinian point of view. And the argument is that, first of all, that whole area of politics and that whole area of politics is fraught, and that there is much more to it than one side or the other may put forward. And either way, on two sets of interviews, he and another white applicant have been excluded. Now, that's not to say I'm not commenting or in no way derogating on the skills of the black judges that were put forward, but we have a court that currently, and has for some years, been entirely black. Now, that position isn't a problem, provided people are there on merit. That's given the JSC's processes, that may be open to question. But if the government's very, very keen on transformation per the demographic of the society, and if they want to go with the strict demographics, which we would be opposed to, then there should be room for at least one and a bit white judges. And one and a bit white judges have not made the cut. So the overhaul of the Judicial Service Commission is crucial, and it's got to get rid of it's got to have fewer people and expert people, and get rid of even the nice, good politicians. It's not a forum for politicians.
And I think this is such a clear example of what we've been talking about over the last few weeks, is that you have justice and you have social justice. And people often ask us when we make these shows and we make these statements, but isn't social justice just a good thing? Isn't it just an add-on to broader justice? And this is a very clear example where, in the interest of social justice, capital S, capital J, a person who has the skill set to apply actual justice, make a real difference, not look better or on or off a bench, but make a real difference, bring justice where injustices have occurred, where you've got social justice saying he's a white man, he deserves not to be there, and you've got justice saying, but he's got the skills to be there, he can make a real difference. And it seems like politicians in specific parties opt for the one and not the other.
No, look, I mean, essentially, the social justice appointment runs the risk of not providing the best decision-making for the sake of the country. The person that's decided on skill, and I mean, David, I think, was head of the World Bank Tribunal. It is a commercial body. I mean, commercial law is difficult stuff. So, to deal with that is no small feat. So, it's definitely a case of, you may benefit a person as representative of a group of people, but not benefit the people as a whole.
And I think that that's so tragic, because it fundamentally it's an insult to white people, black people, colored people, Indian people, thinking that you, Indian lawyer, or you, black lawyer, or you, white or colored lawyer, your understanding of the law isn't deep enough to apply it to someone who looks differently from you and might have a different experience from you. We look at people like Pius Langa, Justice Moseneke. And then we look overseas to one of my absolute heroes, Justice Clarence Thomas on the American Supreme Court. Black jurists who, were they to hear my case, a white Afrikaner, I would be happy to trust them to pursue justice. And I think it's such a cheap shot to think that because the color of a judge is one way or the other, we have to go with that and compromising the actual ability of South Africans to have injustices largely affecting people from a different skin color redressed in a court of law.
You see, the thing about reaching a judicial decision is that what the judge we have the adversarial system, so we have the plaintiff or the prosecution and the defendant or respondent, etc. And the thing about that process is the judge can ask questions, but the judge relies on the two parties to put their case to the judge and raise issues and explain issues that may be pertinent to a person's background or their circumstances. And the judge is expected to have the wherewithal to appreciate what's been said and then applies to whether they think it's relevant or not. And as I said, then you've got the appeal system anyway. I mean, the sort of thing of you can't, if you're one color, you cannot appreciate the lived experience of another color. It implies, I think the most awful thing about that is it implies that you somehow lacking in humanity. And look, I mean, judges can lack humanity. I mean, yes. These things can happen. But the point is that most people will appreciate a disadvantaged situation, irrespective of color, if they've either been exposed to it enough or have had it well explained to them.
And I mean, it breaks down into the absurd, because I think if we're going to get very technical about it, I'm one of the whitest people I know. Whenever I stand in a kitchen, I just have to wear bright colors because otherwise I might blend in with the appliances. And if you were to compare my skin color to yours, we'd have differences. So where do you draw the line between races and just different, plascon cards going, let me check this person, oh, they're close enough to understand me.
Well, you see, the insult is in that literally the criteria are based on the color and the assumption that the color reflects a certain experience. And that's the basis. One of the significant bases of CRT is that if you're a Black American, you've had all the disadvantages, none of the advantages, etc., etc. Now, while that may be certainly true to some extent, it's not going to apply absolutely across the board. It doesn't apply to any grouping across the board. And the fact that I may be a slightly darker white than you are, my experience and my history, you may not know it, and you may not know to what extent it may or may not have disadvantaged my back. But that for CRT and for social legal, for critical legal theory, is not the issue. You sort of have to imply the broader negative to the victim grouping, and the broader negative to the victimizer grouping, and the whole thing about justice in the usual sense of the word, I'm going to say it in the usual sense of the word, is that it's a combination of meeting the law, seeing that the facts meet the law, seeing that the argument meets the law, and taking into account what may in fact be almost identical in one court will result in one decision and may result in another court in another decision. And they may be both considered equally unfair or equally fair, but they're not unfair because in certain respects, particularly when it comes to a decision in criminal law, the circumstances of the person affects the sentence. So it's not as if it's a rigid application of immutable laws that ensure that some poor sod is going to end up on the wrong side. Law is a complex thing, and very often people will feel they've ended up on the wrong side. But it's actually about providing justice to an individual that the rest of society can in principle rely on.
And I think with that, I mean, that's the perfect thing to end off on in this episode. Is it's really a question South Africans have to ask ourselves: do we want justice? Do we want, as a society, to be able to trust the law, trust the judicial system to a certain extent, of course, with healthy criticism built in, where we know that whomever sits there and whomever appears before whoever sits there will be judged on the law, predictable and impersonal as it might be, while it is not divorced from the idea that justice should improve the lives of people. And I think it's very telling that we've got a clear example where justice demands one thing, and social justice, the transformationist agenda, the Verwoerdian idea of your color determines who you are, in direct conflict. And I'm so glad the Judicial Service Commission fumbled this, as they fumbled so many things, in time for us to have this episode. And perhaps they should re-Christian themselves. Yes, no, I mean, that's a spectacular commitment to error. But perhaps they should rename themselves the Social Justice Services Commission, because the idea of the judicial concept of justice is not being served by this. And perhaps to end off, and perhaps I'll chat to Mbali about making this the thumbnail of this episode, Lady Justice historically stands weighing the law and the facts with a blindfold. She doesn't peek underneath it to see what the color of the judge or applicant or defendant is. That blindness holds because it's not about your skin color, where you come from. It's about making sure justice advocates for freedom, and the sign-off line being, as ever, your freedom is worth fighting for. Sara, everyone at home, thank you very much. See you next week.